This wasteland they say you are going, we will miss your bright eyes and sweet smile. For they say you are taking the sunshine that has brightened our road for a while.
Hey folks, here we are back at our favorite Hoover Dam train tunnel that I showed you in the previous Nellis Air Force Base episode. But because it reminded me so much of the passage to Zion we traveled through in the game, I just couldn't pass up the opportunity. Oh hey fellas, are you guys going to Zion?
Yep.
Can I go?
Sure.
Oh boy, this is gonna be awesome! I've never been to Zion before. I hear it's really cool, and there's these really cool people there, and oh hey, you think we'll find a snow globe? Because that would be awesome. And yeah, and I heard there's these cool rivers that are so neat, and hey, this cave is really cool. I mean, I heard there's bats in here. I mean, not like scorchbeast bats, but little bats. But there's bats all over, and I know they like caves, but I don't think there's bats in Zion. I mean, I hope. Oh look, we're almost there. Golly, this is going to be so awesome. I'm so excited. I mean, I've never been to a national park before. Well, I guess I was in Appalachia, but that was Shenandoah. It's not at all like Zion. Oh, my shoe's untied. I don't know what's down to these sketchy hikers, but oh boy, do they... What the... Traveling north from Las Vegas on Interstate 15, you'll pass through the Virgin River Gorge entering the state of Utah, a similar passage to that in the game. It's just about a 2.5-hour drive from Vegas and makes for a pretty awesome drive. You'll take the 15 north and exit at UT9 in the town of Hurricane. From there, you'll travel about 12 more miles to Springdale, the gateway town to the park. Archaeologists have determined that the first human visitors to Zion were nomadic Indian family groups who came to the narrow canyon to hunt and plant seeds. These groups were the Virgin Anasazi and Parowan Fremont Indian groups. In the 11th and 12th centuries, these groups essentially disappeared from the area due to extended droughts and severe flooding, making the area inhospitable for growing their crops. Centuries later, the Southern Paiute and Ute arrived. Both groups were migratory and visited the Zion area on a seasonal basis to plant and to hunt game animals. The Southern Paiute began planting corn, squash, and sunflowers and were quite successful with their horticultural endeavors in Zion. As they became more sedentary in their lifestyle, they began making brownware vessels to be used for storage and cooking of their crops. Many of these brownware vessels have been excavated by archaeologists in more recent times and can be seen at the various museums in the area today. In the 18th century, Padre Silvestre Velez de Escalante and Padre Francisco Atancion Dominguez passed through the area that the Mormons will later name the Kolob Canyons on October 13, 1776, making them the first European visitors to the area. Several decades later, a trapper by the name of Jedediah Smith would pass through while scouting areas for the American Fur Company. Then, in 1847, Mormon farmers from Salt Lake would arrive and be the first non-native settlers to the Virgin River area who would then settle the Parowan and Cedar City area in 1851. They used the Kolob Canyon area for timber and cattle grazing, as well as prospecting for mineral deposits. They irrigated the land by diverting water from the Kolob area to the valley below. More farmers then moved into the area and farmed the canyon floor until the canyon was made a national monument by President William Howard Taft on July 31, 1909, creating the Muckintweeop National Monument. A few years later, in 1919, the newly created National Park Service will go on to add more land to the park and officially rename the canyon Zion, the name being used by the local Mormon communities at the time. Initially, travel to the park was difficult due to its remote location and lack of roads, but in a short period of time, roads were built and tourists began to arrive by the carload. In no time at all, a lodge was built and became the focal point for tourists visiting the park. In 1923, the Union Pacific Railroad would acquire the park's Wiley Camp and start operating rail and bus tours of the amazing canyon, similar to those that run today. The park would soon become one of the most popular American national parks due to its breathtaking natural splendor and crystal clear rivers tourists hike through, exploring some of the most unique and beautiful landscapes to be found in the American Southwest. In March of 2009, President Barack Obama signed the Omnibus Public Land Management Act, which further protected an additional 124,406 acres of the park, approximately 85% of it, as the Zion Wilderness. Today, visitors can enjoy the park in a number of ways, including horseback riding tours and day and evening nature programs from late March to late November. There are plenty of amazing campsites, as well as spectacular hiking trails for all levels of hikers and backpackers, a number of which you can take to some of the more out-of-the-way locations such as the Narrows. And of course, for children ages 4 and over, there is the Junior Ranger program, which you can join at the Visitor Center. And being a Junior Ranger myself, I highly recommend this awesome year-round program. The Visitor Center also houses a fantastic natural history museum and a bookstore full of excellent books, maps, and souvenirs, which will help guide you through this amazing park and provide some wonderful things to remember this special place forever. So now that you've learned a little about Zion National Park, let's catch our shuttle and go try and follow the footsteps of Joshua Graham. So in order to keep the environmental impact of motor vehicles on the park to a minimum, you can no longer drive your car into the park yourself. Instead, you just hop on a convenient shuttle which will take you to all the main sites and trailheads. There's dozens of these shuttles running, and they run all day long. The first shuttle leaves the Visitor Center at 6 a.m., and the last one leaves stop number 9, the Temple of Sinawava, at 6:15 p.m. All the stops are on a convenient map right here in the shuttle, so you can always know where you want to go. So if everybody's ready, let's do some exploring. Our first stop will be the Canyon Crossing, a site that matches the in-game version exactly and will be quite familiar to all us Wasteland wanderers. It's where the roads diverge, one going into the park and the other to the Human History Museum. The museum, with its many exhibits, is an excellent way to start your Zion journey and to learn all about the early indigenous peoples who first came here. And speaking of the Native Americans,
California, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah.
While riding to our next stop, we learned all about their history from a Native American speaker on a recording that plays in the bus. It's one of a number of recordings, including some from rangers, national park ones, and not those NCR guys, artists, and more. It's another great way to learn all about the park you're now exploring.
Gave a PSA about keeping your distance from chipmunks. What did I tell you, people? Chipmunks are ferocious and predators. Keep your distance. Be safe.
Our second stop was the Lodge Stop, home to the Zion Lodge, which was one of the first structures built in the park and certainly recognizable from the game as the Fishing Lodge. Since the lodge is right across from the river, it makes sense it would be a fishing lodge in the game. Right across from the lodge, you'll see another familiar footbridge that by crossing, you'll pick up the Emerald Pools trailhead. If you take this trail, you'll traverse a series of switchbacks and come out to the Emerald Pools area, a spectacular part of the park and an area called the Subway, which if you enter, you'll discover the Emerald Pools that the trail is named for. As you can see, the Emerald Pools Trail and the footbridge are faithfully represented in the game. Now, as you know, one of the favorite ways to get around the park in the game is by wading through the rivers. You can do this in the real world as well, and it's a really great way to get to the Narrows. However, when I was there, the rivers were high and there was an algae warning, so wading into the rivers wasn't advisable. So unless you're some crazy courier hell-bent on getting to the Narrows with no regard for safety for yourself or others, you'll want to take a page from your favorite pioneer scout and follow the park rules at all times. Just up from the lodge, you'll arrive at the Grotto Trail. Just a short walk in, and you'll discover the Grotto Trail cabin and immediately recognize it from the game as the Ranger Station cabin. Now, I'd love to go inside and explore it a bit, but it's closed to the public, and besides, I'm allergic to radioactive praying mantises, so let's get back on that bus and continue on, shall we? Our next stop was an impressive part of the canyon with immense cliff walls, featuring one known as the Weeping Rock, so named for the water that trickles down the rock face year-round due to the water from the canyons above. As a result, the area is full of lush, natural hanging gardens. The trail is the shortest in the park, but also one of the most challenging. I'd gladly hike it, but it seems my fellow scouts have gone ahead without me. Again. Gee, that happens a lot. But anyway, as you know, you should never hike alone. Let's move on. Our final stop is probably the most spectacular part of the park, and certainly the most recognizable from the game, the area known as the Narrows. The Narrows, so named for the extreme close proximity of the winding canyon walls, which at points are 1,000 feet high but only 30 feet apart. It is just north of the last bus tour stop, the Temple of Sinawava, and is one of the most popular destinations in the park. You can enjoy the Narrows by hiking the paved trail that meanders alongside the river, or, if the conditions are good, you can wade through the Virgin River for the most fallout experience you are likely to have while visiting Zion, or anywhere else in the Mojave for that matter. Summer and fall are the best times to hike the Narrows, as it's most ideal for river walking and the scenery is in its full splendor. It's a hike unlike any other, and one you'll certainly never forget. Well, folks, that concludes our amazing tour of Zion National Park. I sincerely hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I really encourage you to visit it for yourself. You'll want to come back again and again and see as much of this national treasure as you can. You probably won't find Joshua Graham or Daniel, but you're certain to find an adventure that will last a lifetime. Hi folks, and welcome to the second and final part of our DLC episode, The Lonesome Road. Now there's much debate about the location and route of the Lonesome Road, in fact, which road it even is. And from my travels, I can honestly say it's quite understandable, as there are no real-world equivalents to many of the locations, with the exception of one, Ashton, a turn-of-the-century rail stop between Pahrump and Tonopah that no visible traces of exist today. However, it is indeed a real-world location, and that, as well as what I discussed about Area 51 in the previous episode, is what will be the basis for our final DLC adventure. Come on, let's hit the road. Howdy, folks. Here we are back in Primm, Nevada, so I can show you the location for the canyon passage to the Lonesome Road, exactly where it exists in the real world. It's just about 10 miles directly north of the CHP station on the Long 15, and is essentially an unmaintained road that comes out right behind Primm, just as it does in the game. But for me, the real-world location similarities pretty much end there. Now, there's a lot of speculation in the Fallout community about the Lonesome Road and its location in the real world, and sure, if you were to travel up that road and through the pass, you would come out south of Death Valley, the place the Lonesome Road seems to be widely associated with. But in this episode, I will put forward my own theory as to why I think the Lonesome Road is actually Nevada State Route 95 and why I think the Amargosa Valley is the actual real-world location that we know as the Divide. Let's first consider where you would end up if you took that unmaintained road up from Primm. Well, after trespassing on miles of private ranch land and traversing some really difficult mountains, you'd probably end up in a narrow canyon that leads into Death Valley from the south, where I'm standing now. To get further into Death Valley, if you were to continue following this canyon, would probably require an aircraft. In fact, aircraft are exactly what you might see from this location, as it's used for training Top Gun type pilots in the most sophisticated aircraft we have. The pilots have nicknamed the canyon Star Wars Canyon in tribute to the kind of daredevil-type stunts performed by Anakin and Luke Skywalker on the fictitious Tatooine in the Star Wars films. If you have earplugs and the nerves to watch it, just hang out here and catch a free air show like no other. But whether you take the canyon passage out of Primm, or if you start your journey north from downtown Las Vegas, you are going to end up on State Route 95, one of Nevada's major highways and what I believe to be the true Lonesome Road. Why the 95, you ask? Well, for starters, once you leave Las Vegas heading north on this highway, you will travel a number of miles along the western border of the Nevada National Security Site, or as we know it, the Nuclear Test Site. Now, the site is massive, and although it was primarily used for the Cold War nuclear testing, it's very likely there are missile silos on any number of the bases that populate it. You won't find them anywhere else, and certainly none in Death Valley. Farther north in the 95, between Tonopah and Fallon, you'll drive past the Hawthorne Army Depot, an ammunition storage depot full of bunkers. It's not Hopeville, but it certainly has a similar feel, being a military storage depot, and further proof that 95 is very likely the Lonesome Road. Speaking of Fallon, it's the western terminus of State Route 50, nicknamed the loneliest road in America. Now, 50 is an east-west road that's pretty far north from Vegas, so it's not our Lonesome Road. But beyond it being named the loneliest road in America, it is significant to us Wastelanders for another reason. Before it was a state highway, it was the famous Pony Express Trail used by the legendary mail delivery riders who the Mojave Express couriers are based on. You can learn a little bit more about it by visiting Wayward Wolf Productions' website, www.waywardwolfproductions.com, and get a glimpse of an upcoming Pony Express feature film in the making. So now that we know a little bit more about the Lonesome Road and its geography in the real world, let's travel up 95 and see what we find. After passing by the Nevada test site and stocking up on road supplies at the Area 51 Alien Center, a must-stop when visiting the Amargosa Valley, we arrived at our first destination, the town of Beatty. Now, at first glance, Beatty may be a likely candidate for Hopeville, but after exploring the area a bit further, I really don't think it is. It's kind of in the right place in the real world and is accurately known as the gateway to Death Valley, but there's no mention of Beatty in the game, and there's no real connection to military installations like Hopeville has in the game, other than its fairly close proximity to the Nellis test range. Regardless, let's explore Beatty a bit and see what it has to offer for us wasteland explorers. Beatty was established in 1905 and named after Montilus Murray Old Man Beatty, who operated a ranch in the nearby Oasis Valley and became the town's first postmaster. The town grew when gold was discovered in nearby rhyolite, and then again with the construction and operation of the Nellis Test Range and other federal installations in the area, which have greatly contributed to the town's growth and economy in modern times. The little desert town is a great stop for those traveling to Death Valley and features the Stagecoach Hotel and Casino, the popular Sourdough Saloon, where you can sign or make a note on a dollar bill which will be posted on the ceiling for all to see. There's cool shops and super cool hotels. There's the awesome Death Valley Nut and Candy Company next door to the Stagecoach, and gosh, when it comes to nuts and candy and souvenirs, this place has it all. I had a hard time leaving it behind. There's wasteland things all around to see. And right when you're about to leave town, you'll spot the Beatty Museum. And as you can see, free admission, so that's perfect. Especially if you just blew all your money at the Death Valley Nut and Candy Company. But I digress. So stop in at the museum and learn all about the history of the town of Beatty. Backtracking a little bit, and just south of Beatty, you'll pass through some desert with absolutely nothing to see in any direction, or so it seems. But just about 15 miles south of Goldfield, an old mining town bordering Tonopah, are the coordinates to what used to be the town of Ashton, the only real-world Lonesome Road location that has an in-game counterpart. However, the Ashton in the game is home to a live ballistic missile silo and appears to be a base in a town once built around it. The real-world Ashton was once nothing more than a railroad depot used for supplying water to trains traveling between Vegas, Goldfield, and Tonopah. When a number of the mines dried up and the railroad was no longer needed, Ashton was abandoned and eventually lost to the desert. Regardless, Coyote and I are going to find the exact coordinates via my cell phone and see if we can discover any traces left. Ready, fellow wanderers? Ready, Coyote? Let's do this! Come on, Pip-Boy, don't fail me now! Golly, I think Coyote's picked up a scent. We'll find Ashton in no time. Oh, it's over there? Over there? Okay. Okay. I hope that water tank is still in Ashton. Coyote! 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 I'm coming, Coyote! Stay in the trail, girl! Dehydrated? Oh, that's not good. I'm coming, Coyote! I'm coming! Well, we didn't find anything to prove Ashton was there. But just as we were about to leave, we found some abandoned buildings only about a mile from the exact Ashton GPS coordinates, and these look a lot like the in-game Ashton. They could certainly have been the inspiration, and to me they were worth getting a closer look at. Especially since I don't see any of those creepy tunnelers around here. Nope! So there's Ashton. Good job, Coyote! Now, even though Ashton doesn't exist, it's critical to my theory about 95 being the Lonesome Road, as its location is only a few miles west of 95, and it sits between Tonopah and Las Vegas, pretty much as it does in the game. Assuming Tonopah is the end of the Lonesome Road where you'll find Ulysses hanging out in his base, but we'll explore Tonopah shortly. But for now, let's check out a ghost town right below it called Rhyolite. Come on! Traveling toward Death Valley on State Route 374 heading west brings us to a fascinating ghost town called Rhyolite. Now, of all the places I've been, none look more like the landscape of Fallout, especially that of Lonesome Road, than Rhyolite. The town was once a booming gold mining town that sprang up from the desert when gold was struck in the nearby Bullfrog Hills in 1904. Industrialist Charles Schwab invested heavily in the mine and immediately built critical infrastructure by piping in water, bringing in electrical lines, and establishing rail transportation, which, as mentioned, previously passed through the nearby town of Ashton. In the span of just 2 weeks, Rhyolite went from a 2-man camp to a population of 1,200. Almost instantly, construction began, and in no time at all, the town hosted modern banks, 50 saloons, 35 gambling tables, a number of brothels, 19 lodging houses, 16 restaurants, and dozens of barbers, public bathhouses, and shops. A weekly newspaper sprang up, the Rhyolite Herald. 4 daily stages and the rail line brought more people in, and the population quickly grew to 2,500 only a few months later. By 1907, the town had grown to 5,000. By then, the town featured concrete sidewalks, electric lights, water mains, and telephone and telegraph lines. There were police stations and a fire department, a school, a railway station, and a hospital. For entertainment, there was an opera house and a public swimming pool. The most prominent structure in the town was the John S. Cook Bank, which featured stairs of Italian marble and imported stained glass windows. The bank was founded in 1908 and cost about $90,000 at the time to build, an estimated $2,930,000 by today's standards. Although the mine produced an estimated 1 million, 24 million today, of gold in 1908, fears of it drying up led to a rapid decline and its stock value plummeted to an eventual crash. As it turns out, the speculation was accurate and the mine did indeed dry up. Further, the San Francisco earthquake of 1906 required capital to be diverted for relief and reconstruction efforts and devastated the rail service to the town. In just 4 years, the population shrank to just 675. By 1910, all 3 banks and most businesses had closed down. In July of 1914, the last train departed Rhyolite, leaving it almost completely deserted. In fact, the 1920 census reported the population to be only 20. Today, Rhyolite is in a state of natural decay and, as you can see, strongly resembles the scenery of our Fallout universe more than any other single location you can visit in the Mojave, let alone in the country. It's a striking reminder of just how fragile our human plans and endeavors can sometimes be. But Rhyolite to me is the most likely inspiration for much of what we see on the Lonesome Road, and its proximity to Tonopah, which I believe to be the location of Ulysses' temple, really makes me think it's the remains of the town you enter after exiting the Cave of the Abandoned. Quite possibly, the shafts and tunnels from the Bullfrog mine from which Rhyolite sprang. Now that we've explored what might be the town and the cave leading to Ulysses' temple, let's head up to Tonopah, the neighboring town I believe to be the end of the Lonesome Road and where you might find where Ulysses set up shop. But first, you guessed it, a little history and our next stop. Tonopah, like Rhyolite, Beatty, and nearby Goldfield, was the result of a gold and silver strike that happened in 1900 when prospector Jim Butler was searching for a burro that had strayed from his ranch. He found the burro the next morning, and when he picked up a rock to throw at it in frustration, he noticed the rock was unusually heavy. This led to his discovery of the second richest silver strike in Nevada history. Like all mining towns, word spread quickly and hopeful prospectors descended, resulting in a typical overnight construction and population boom. What separates Tonopah from so many of the other gold towns is that a number of the mines are still in operation today. In fact, the mines now yield about $150 million in revenue. Because the mines continue to produce ore in high volume even after the stock market crash and resulting mining restrictions of 1907, which destroyed Rhyolite, neighboring Tonopah was able to weather the storm and survive long afterwards, allowing it to prosper further from the arrival of the Nellis Test Range in the 1940s. The test range would further secure the town's prosperity and become the largest employer in the area. In the 1950s, the Tonopah Test Range would be used for testing missiles, aircraft, and nuclear weapon delivery systems. This certainly leads more credibility that Ulysses might have chosen this location for his base, as he had discovered nuclear weapons to use in his plans. Today, the Tonopah Test Range is home to Area 52, a key stealth technology development and testing center like its nearby cousin Area 51. If you visit Tonopah, and I highly recommend you do, you'll discover an amazing mix of Old West history, modern technology, and quirky desert culture all coexisting in a single place, not unlike most of the Mojave as we have discovered. For the Old West side of things, just stop by the historic Tonopah Mining Park and visit the museum to learn all about the town's fascinating and enduring mining history. For a wonderful Old West experience, book a stay at the legendary Mizpah Hotel, nicknamed the Jewel of the Desert, and rightfully so. This elegant hotel, established in 1907, has been a favorite destination for many travelers over the years and has enjoyed the company of such legends as Wyatt Earp, Jack Dempsey, who worked there as a bouncer for a while, and Howard Hughes, our very own Mr. House, who married Jean Peters in this very hotel. According to legend, the hotel is home to a ghost named the Lady in Red. The hotel has 2 wonderful restaurants with outstanding meals and a lively bar. The hotel is pet-friendly and is an ideal place to stay when discovering the Mojave and its rich history, as a stay here will immerse you in it. And as far as quirky pop culture goes, you'll be hard-pressed to find anything more representative of that in Tonopah than the world-famous, and also allegedly haunted, Clown Motel, which I covered in the previous episode. If you want to stay at a hotel but not catch a wink of sleep, this is the place for you. Finally, regarding the technology part, we obviously can't visit the test site or Area 52 as they are secure, active military installations and home to all sorts of classified projects. You can learn all about them from official sites online, but it's important to my theory that Tonopah is Ulysses' temple. As mentioned, the base has been used for ballistic testing and is a key test site for modern weapons testing today. Further, Tonopah is the junction town where State Route 95 leaves the southern part of the Mojave and heads north. In the game, the Lonesome Road is where you, as the courier, travel to head to Vegas, walking above a series of underground ballistic weapons bases. Now, as we learned when we visited the National Atomic Testing Museum, underground nuclear testing did indeed take place on the Nellis Test Range, but as far as I know, it was farther south and none done around Tonopah. But the journey from Tonopah to Vegas will have you passing right by a number of them just miles from the highway, with Tonopah being the last and farthest north of them, essentially the terminus. This, more than any other fact, is what leads me to believe the historic little town of Tonopah, home to a rich history and amazing technology, is also home to Ulysses in the Lonesome Road DLC. But before we put the Lonesome Road behind us, take a look at what I found here in Rhyolite. Doesn't this look a bit like that building at the Junction 7 rest stop? Well, let's get a closer look, shall we? Hey, Coyote! I'm gonna go in and see if I can find anything. Oh, golly! I just knew I'd find something in here. And here you have it, folks. Definitive proof of my theory that if you travel Nevada State Route 95, you'll be traveling on what we know as the Lonesome Road.